All right, everyone. I'm making a video here to go over trailing stops. So, a couple of things that I need to address first. In order to use trailing stops, they have to be enabled. In order to, sorry, hold on for 1 second. In order to enable trailing stops, you would have to go to the main window, which is this one down here. And the main window is always going to be somewhere on your screen. It is impossible to have this application open without this window being visible. So it's somewhere on your screen. You look for it. First thing you want to go is view settings. When you go into here, you're going to basically look through the settings and decide what you want to be enabled or disabled. Under price types, you'll notice that one of the selections is T-stop right here. As long as that is checked, you'll be able to find trailing stops. If it's not selected, you will not be able to find trailing stops. So in other words, if this is not checked, the trailing stop feature will not be available anywhere on the platform. So you have to check that first. Now, some other things that you might want to do is go up here and set a default setting for the trailing stop sizes. Now, the first part of the trailing stop is the amount. The amount means that when you start your position, whether you're buying or selling, when you enter a position, this is telling the software how far away from that position the stop loss is supposed to be. So if you're buying a stock, it's going to place the stop loss this amount below the stock. And if you're selling a stock as a short seller, it's going to place the stop loss this amount above. That amount is in dollars. So in other words, 5 means $5, 525 means 525, 531, etc. So whatever you set it to, that's going to set the distance of the stop loss from where you start. The increment basically says how far does the market have to move from your entry point before the stop loss itself is moved up. So again, this is where the stop loss starts. And this is how much movement the market has to achieve in order to move the stop loss forward. So let's use an example. If I set it as 0.01, that means that every time the stock moves a penny forwards, then it's going to move the stop loss 1 penny forwards. So in other words, if I enter a stock at $100 a share and it goes to $100.01 a share, then the stop loss is going to go up by 1 penny. Then if it goes from $100.01 a share to $100.02 a share, then again, the stop loss is going to move up by 1 penny. So every time the stock advances, if let's say you're a buyer, every time the stock makes a new high above your entry point from where you started, then it's going to go up by a penny. So that means the stop will continually trail behind. If you set it to something else, let's say I set it to 2, that means that every time the stock moves $2, the stop loss is going to move up by $2. And that means that if the stock goes $1.99 forwards but doesn't go further than that, the stop loss will not be moved. It has to go the exact amount or greater that this number represents for the stop loss to move, and it will only be moved by the exact increment, which in this case is $2. So if I want the stop loss to move every time the stock advances by $5, I would set it like this. And I would just have to set the starting position. Now, if I set the starting position at $3, it would still work. The stop loss will be $3 behind me. And every time the stock moves by $5, the stop loss is going to be moved up by $5. So it doesn't really matter what which you set the amount to. The increment's still going to kick in and move the stop loss by whatever you say. But of course, you do need to think about this stuff when you do it, because if you set the settings the wrong way, you may get stopped out a lot faster than you want, or stopped out a lot later than you want. Now, the next thing is this. Once I hit OK, let's say I don't have this check mark selected. Once I hit OK, this is going to be the default settings that I'm going to see whenever I go to the trailing stop. But when I go here, what that's going to do is it's going to make sure that a trailing stop is added every time I enter into a new position. Meaning that if I place a limit order to buy to get into a trade or to sell to get into a trade, the software is going to automatically add a trailing stop. Now, one thing I want to emphasize to you is that in the event that you place an order to sell something or buy something that you already have, if you don't do it as a closing order, if it's not designated specifically as a closing order, then it's going to enter a new stop loss, a new trailing stop, the moment that order is filled. So you would have to make sure you've selected the type of order that would be a closing order. Now that is a little bit of a complexity that you may not be familiar with, but in other words, there are going to be ways that you get out of a trade that are different. So in short, the platform has multiple ways you can execute trades. Some of these order types, etc., you won't be familiar with. But the point is, if you have the automatic trailing stop feature selected, a trailing stop will be added. But anytime you exit a trade, depending on how you exit, it may actually trigger the addition of a trailing stop being added. So if you make sure you look at your exit, your trade after you exit it, to make sure no trailing stop has been added afterwards. Okay. Now, this is the way to set the defaults on that, but let's suppose that I want to add a trailing stop up here. So the first thing I have to do is select it. There's trailing stop. Now, the next thing I have to do is to tell it what price increment, the amount that the trailing stop should be behind the market. Now, if I do this, this is going to be a problem. I can't do market, because if I do that, the trailing stop is literally going to be entered exactly at where the market is now, which of course is going to stop me out. So what I want to do is actually select the price. I'm going to do that manually. So I'm not going to put an actual price for the stop loss. I'm going to enter the amount. So I put 5, let's say. Right now it's saying that the trailing stop is going to start $5 behind the market, wherever my entry is. And then I'm going to set the increment, which in this case I want to make 5 as well. Okay, now all I have to do is decide if I want to do a buy stop or a sell stop. Let's say I do a buy stop. If I do this, then what's going to happen is it's going to drop a trailing stop to buy that is going to be $5 basically above where the market is now. So I hit buy. And now, if I look over here, I've got a trailing stop that is at $34.44. And the reason why it's at that particular price, $34.44, is because at the time I entered this trailing stop, the market was $5 lower at $29.44. So now I have a trailing stop to buy at $34.44. Now, of course, a buy stop will have to be above the market, because that's what stop losses are for. They're going to get you out if you're exiting a trade above the market. Now, I'm going to cancel this for a second, and let's do another. So I'm going to do the sell stop this time. I'm going to go trailing stop again. I'm going to enter the price, or sorry, the amount, not the price, the amount. This time I'll put $6, and I'm going to make the increment $5. Okay, so this is the amount here, and that's the increment over there. So now I'm going to hit sell, and now it's entered a stop loss, right? And the trailing stop is right there. It says 23.3799, basically saying that that is $6 below the market price that was happening at that time. All right, so that's based on whatever trade execution had just happened. So now if I want to modify that in any way, I can right click here, I can hit change, and then it pops up this window. And then I can change the increment. I can say, well, I want to change it from $6 to $7. Okay, so when I send that, we're going to look at the price here and see what happens. So now the price changed. Now I see 23.37 something, right? And if I do it again, let's change it again. and now we're going to make it 8, and I hit send. Notice that the increment goes down by another $1. So why is it going down by $1? Because every time I change the amount, I meant to say not the increment, the amount, it's taking it from where the market was at the time that I placed this trailing stop, right? And then I'm just adding more distance in this case. But if I want to make it get closer to the market, I can do this. I can say make it 4. So now the stop loss, the sell stop is at 25.37.99. So all that's happening is when I'm making these adjustments, okay, I'm not going to see the number here change if I change the increment. The increment is not going to affect what I see right here. The increment only affects what will happen once the stock has moved the requisite distance. So basically, at this point, this order is pretty much useless because I don't have an open position, so therefore I don't really need it. But if I had an open position, then this would just be trailing behind wherever my open position is. Okay, so it's best to have the trailing stops set up to be entered automatically, in my opinion, because that way they're going to be entered and they're going to be connected directly to the entry point of your position. So make sure again you go to here, go to settings, and then under price types, make sure you select T stop. And then when you go to equities, make sure you set the parameters to your default. You don't want these parameters to be too close, because if they're too tight, you may be entering into a stock like Tesla, which has larger ranges of movement, and you might get stopped out instantly if you have too small parameters. In other words, if I put my parameters at 25 cents, then that is going to get me in trouble with some stocks, because I'll put the order in and the stock may actually move 25 cents very quickly. So I tend to leave it at $5 because that's a number that I know the vast majority of stocks that we'll end up trading will not be able to quickly move up or down $5. And that'll give us time to make the adjustment to the stop after we get in. Okay. All right. Other than that, folks, that's it for trailing stops. So make sure you use them if you want, and go from there.